Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Kari, for the introduction. It's been a pleasure. And this is an exquisite painting, and it's by this guy, Frederick Church. And it was so exquisite when the artist revealed it to the public. There were people who actually fainted. It was so beautiful when you look at the detail. And Mark Twain said he saw it many times, and every time he looked at it, he saw something different. And that's what I would say consider an almost perfect embodiment of creative output that has even I looked at it so many times, and every time I look at it, it's just stunningly beautiful. And there are aspects of it that you've got to look at it with a microscope to actually see the detail. And these are things that inspire me. Now, I've been an inventor all my life, and initially I used to be terribly, embarrassed to say that, but I had no other way to describe what I was doing. And then one day I went to the American embassy, and an occupation I put inventor, and when I went for my visa, and this guy says, "Oh, I've never met an inventor before, what an honor." And that was it, and there was no problem with the visa, nothing. And from then, inventor became acceptable to me also, because I don't really have any other occupation to talk of. From 2017, I had started this company, Touche Tech Labs. And in keeping with the theme of today's talk, touch, in a strange way, touche is a French word for touch or to be touched. And touche tech is technology that touches or touched by technology. And so I started this company, Touche Tech. And that's because the last 12 years of my life, I've been touched so significantly that I've actually changed course completely. And from what I was doing earlier to what I'm doing now. And that story is what I want to talk to you about. This is in the foreword of this book that my mom gave me some years ago. And it explains it much better. The editor, this Gordon Rattray Taylor, explains this really well. And he says that perhaps the most misleading catchphrase learned in childhood is necessity is the mother of invention. Most examples of invention show that the opposite is true, and that is invention is the mother of necessity. And if you look at, say, the mobile phone, in the last 20 years, we've only had it for 20 years. Before that, it wasn't a necessity at all, because before that, we didn't know what mobile phones could do. Till Steve Jobs came along, and then his invention created what is now a necessity. So this thing is very true, and this guy, Gordon Rattray Taylor, explains it beautifully. That's one thing that I wanted to talk about, and another thing is the difference between innovation and invention. I won't bother you with all this technical stuff anymore. As soon as I finish one more slide, and then I'll go to the story of the. This is that everybody who talks to me say, "Oh, what a fantastic innovation, fantastic innovation." And there's a fundamental difference between an innovation and an invention. An innovation is when you take something that exists and you tweak it a little bit to get more value out of it. And so a tactile script over there, I've put over there, that's my name there. And if you kind of raise it and emboss it or something, you get something that can be felt, and that's an innovation. You've taken an existing script and you've embellished it and added more value, got more value out of it. And so that's an innovation. You take something that exists and you get more value out of it. But an invention is something that didn't exist, that is created from scratch, that is totally new. And that's what Louis Braille did. But anyway, this was actually Braille over here. But it's kind of vanished in the font, I think, didn't come. So and this is one last little point I want to talk about. Creative thinking is simply mean the realization that there is no particular virtue in doing things the way they have been always done before. And when you realize that, when you look at things around you, you've got to try to look at it differently. Does it need to be that way, or can you change? And if you can change, is the change that you are proposing or that you're thinking about is going to add more value to that proposition, or is it not going to add? So that would be the fundamental questions you would ask when you're dealing with something like being creative. Whether what you're doing is going to add more value to it if you change it. And changing is very difficult because most people don't like change. They don't accept change. And if it's something new, they just kind of reject it out of hand. So that's as far as, okay, my company, the last slide of boredom, it's called Touche Tech Labs, as Kari mentioned. Touche, because it refers to touch. Most of my work is dealing with the visually impaired. Actually, I spoke to many friends and they said visually impaired dilutes the definition. Just say blind, and that's actually what we are. That's legally blind, those who cannot see. Because visually impaired is me wearing my things, I'm visually impaired. And I don't fit into the category of those. I'm just like watering down and diluting their situation so badly that I'm equating their situation with mine, which is very unfair to them and to everybody else. So Touche is in French because Louis Braille was the guy who invented the Braille script, and he was a French guy. And then Touche meant touch, and I was touched, and that's changed the course of my life. And so I started this company because the government, who were happy with what I was doing, they said they'll sponsor the development of these Braille display technologies. And so they gave me 2 grants. The central government gave me a grant, and state government also gave me a grant. And so that was really fantastic. So they did that. So I started this company because they needed me to start a company. And we made these Braille displays. I'll tell you a little bit about them because I need to explain the creative process that went into making them. The Braille modules on the left is what my company actually produces, and we sell them to other companies like Wemby and Tinkerbell and all that, and they put them into their devices. It would be like what Intel does. They say Intel Inside. It's just the chip that goes into the computers that many other companies make. So we've got the Braille modules, and Touche, the second machine, was a company called Sapient. They collaborated with me and did product development, and we came out to that. That would be the equivalent of a Kindle for the blind. And later another company, Wemby. And so that's about what we do. And this is when my life's course took a deviation, and I started working with the blind. And it's how it started was kind of my story. And these are a couple of inventions that have happened in the last decade, 10 years. It started with that one that I've circled on the top, which is what's called a multi-line Braille display. And how it happened is the entire device was conceived in ignorance. And how I'm saying that because I'm qualifying that because I didn't know a single blind person. I didn't have a single blind friend. I would cross the road. I'd feel so uncomfortable when I saw someone who was blind. I'd cross the road and walk on the other side of the road. I'm ashamed to say that now, but I would do that. I didn't know how to react. And then what happened was, through this set of circumstances, you remember the movie Titanic? And when it was going down, there was this hymn that was made very popular. The 3 violinists played this beautiful hymn. Now, I know the way the music goes for that. And so I was listening to that and listening to this orchestra playing the music when the Titanic was going down. So as I was running my finger over the music score, trying to figure out how does a musician translate these little lines and dots on the page, on the music score. How are they translating into the lovely music I was hearing? I still don't know the answer to how a musician does that, but this is the way it kind of popped up in my mind. Those little dots began to pop out of the page as I was running my finger along, and they slowly kind of changed into these Braille dots that made more sense to me. I could understand the Braille code that was forming, and you can see it's very similar to Western music, the music score. It's like the dots came alive in my mind. And the next set of, what should I say, the inspiring thing that happened was, I said, if I can make a device that produces these dots and gets them to come out of the page, then someone who's blind would be able to read music. And then I said, why music? I mean, you can get Braille if you can do something like that. And so then I set about making a machine to produce those dots, to make them come out of the page. And that's what, this was the machine, the first prototype of a Braille display. And this is where it got exciting, because everyone I spoke to, they said it can't be done. And they were really encouraging. Cannot be done at Braille scale. You just can't do it. Everybody's tried it. Nobody can do it. And they were really encouraging. And so that came. That was it. So literally that. But then it became even more exciting. When I produced the prototype, nobody was interested because then it didn't suit their market interests or whatever, the commercial interests. And it was also undermining the existing know-how and technology. So I had to actually take it to the next stage by myself. That's when the central government came in, kicked in, and they said, this is fantastic. Take it forward. We'll give you a grant. And for a central government scientist to tell me, do whatever you have to do, even if you fail, it's okay. That was the thing. That was fantastic. Government of India, central government. So I made that, took it forward, and then I made another device, and there are about 10 devices in this category. And the little bottom window of this over there, there's another top middle is my second version. Then right in the middle is a blue one, which actually worked nicely, and it would take anyone who typed whatever English script, it would translate it into Braille. And so I demonstrated it at a Maker Fair, and then Sapient came along, and they said, we'll take it to product development, and they made the top right, which is Touche, and I'll show this to you later. So Touche was made in collaboration with Sapient, and that was the Braille e-reader for the blind. So that's as far as my journey into this thing of Braille. Now, on this journey, I got to meet people for the first time, the blind people. It was after I made the device that I made. So I met this girl, Sabriya Ten Birkin. She was the founder of Braille Without Borders. Blind girl, went alone to Tibet, lived alone, taught herself the language, developed the Braille script for them. She's on Oprah's 10 Most Inspiring Women. And she turns out to be my first blind friend. So when you meet someone like that, you just get so fired up. I mean, first you feel like a worm, then you get fired up, and then you say, what can I do to kind of make life a little easier for them? I used to visit her outfit called Braille Without Borders. Now it's called Kantari. In Trivandrum, she had a branch. So I used to visit her often to talk about all these things. And while I was there, from the most complicated device I've ever made, the Braille display, to the little circle over there was the least complicated of my inventions. And that happened because while I was there, the girl in the middle is Tiffany Bra. And she said, Paul, why don't you do something for us? So I said, I'm trying, Tiffy, I'm trying this Braille display. She says, not that. I said, then tell me what? She said, can you make us something to help us identify currency notes? So I made that device. That was about the third version in 2013. And it was called, I named it after her because she said, oh, this is lovely. And she asked me to make for her friends, and I made them. And it was just a little cutout template. And they could identify notes. And then in early 2017, there was this crowdfunding campaign we did. We successfully, and a company called Fuel a Dream did crowdfunding for us. And we made, it was a successful campaign. And we could give them free to anyone in the country who wanted any quantity. So we did that for many tens of thousands of them. We sent out free to whoever asked. So I used to make that. And I named it after her Tiffy template. So that's how the Tiffy template came along. And that was the least complicated of my inventions. And meeting with all these people, every time you meet them, their whole life is a challenge. Everything they do is a challenge. And they are solving problems at every stage. So you tend to become, just by association, more, observant, more aware of the other person as opposed to yourself. And you're constantly focusing on the other person to make sure that they don't fall, they don't trip, and what can I do to make them easier? How can I explain something to them so that they understand? Like if the picture I showed you at the beginning, the lovely painting, if you had to explain it to someone who's blind, that's a challenge. But then Sabriya told me, she's blind, and she said, we are never disappointed with reality, like a sighted person, because we create our own reality. So we are never disappointed. So you can explain it as best as you can, and they will be happy because they will never be disappointed. They are creating their own reality as you're explaining it to them. That was Sabriya's description. So I didn't feel so bad. After that, but I began to understand them a little better. So that was the Tiffy template and how I came about that. This is a tactile geometry kit. And the story about how this came about is more interesting. And now these are friends of mine, okay? On the left is Aishwarya, she's blind. She lost her sight at about, I think by her third year she had completely gone blind. And that is Neha Trivedi. She was from Xavier Resource Center for Visually Challenged. She was the boss for all practical purposes. Dr. Sam, who was the actual boss, would listen to her. She's a lovely person. Both of them lovely people, okay? And I work with them a lot. And Neha is a no-nonsense person, the middle lady. She's a tough customer, and if she says do something, you do it. There's no ifs, buts, why, how, and all that. You just do it. And Aishwarya, on the other hand, is a student. She's very calm, gentle, and nice and all. So we were at this conference in early 2020, just before COVID hit. And we met and we discussed all the problems that, by now my life is fully involved only with blind, okay? So all my inventions are only for them, and I find them the most inspiring people to work with. So we were discussing problems, solutions, what to do, what not to do, why certain things won't work, why certain things will work for the blind, and things like that. So Neha was also there. We were all sorts of discussions, hectic, because they are working a lot with education, developing a curriculum to teach the blind, and teaching math and science is terrible because you can't explain things, a lot of concepts, math, experiments, things like that you can't do. And so a lot of these discussions were going on, high-level discussions. And Aishwarya's boss, Supriya, was also there. She runs a trust called Vision Empower, where they go to schools and teach people. So I was walking Aishwarya back to her room, and I said, tell me what's on your wish list. So she said, I want to be able to draw. Now, this is a blind girl. And that was something that, it challenged me. Like, I said, Aishwarya, I think I might be able to take you to the moon and back before that, but anyway, I'll try. But when you respect somebody, and when you admire them, and when they make a request, it's very, very easy to fulfill that request or take it to the next level of trying to give them a solution. So I'm blessed with sort of a creative mind, and all you need is a trigger. And that request triggered it. And so I made this little drawing tool, and I scribbled a little thing for her boss. Boss's name, I said Supriya, and Tactile script, and I sent it to her, and she got very excited. And how did you do this, that, and the other? I said, when you come back, she was going to Bombay. And she went to meet Neha, who was the Xavier Resource Center. And then they were discussing this problem of teaching geometry to the kids. So in the meantime, Aishwarya had tried out some of the sample that I had made for her, and she was very excited. Supriya. So Neha tells Supriya, we can't do this geometry part, it's too difficult, and we've done 2 years of research, and we've come up with this big detailed study. And this is all we've studied all the methods all around the world, and this is. She said, have you asked Paul? Because if he's inspired, he'll make you something in a day. Now, all this I didn't know, that they had all these fancy ideas about me and how I perform. But anyway, so Neha picked, and then she said, did you see what Paul did for the tactile drawing? So she showed her name. So Neha got very angry. She said, I was there with him 2 days ago. He never showed me anything, and all this. And then she picks up the phone and calls me and gives me a good firing. I was there, you never showed it to me, this. And I said, Neha, I promise you I didn't have anything. I just made this. She said, anyway, send me the drawing tool. We'll evaluate it. So I sent her the drawing tool. She evaluated it, and then she calmed down a bit. And she said, then I get a call. Hey, Paul, how are you? And I said, Neha, something wrong. What's this? I'm not used to being treated so nicely. No, how did you do it? It's do what? Because, I'm used to her being a real tough customer. She's a lovely person, delightful. But this was out of character, this nice, kind behavior. How are you? And all this thing. It doesn't happen with Leah. So she said, okay, now that this drawing tool that you made called the roulette, that's the roulette. I'll show it to you. I'll demonstrate how it works. Because to do geometry, you need to be able to draw tactile drawings on paper, something that they can feel. So I made this little drawing tool, and then they could draw on paper. So that was a huge thing, because now they can actually draw lines and things like that. So she said, okay, you've done this. Now do the geometry kit. I said, yeah, I can't cook up inventions. I don't know anything. I failed in maths in college, all this thing, but I can't do this. So she said, no, you do the drawing kit. And then a few weeks later, she says, come on a call, Zoom call, and Dr. Sam wants to speak to you. Now, Dr. Sam's the boss of that Xavier Resource. He's blind. So I said, hi, doc, and all that. He says, Paul, Neha told me you're making the geometry kit. When can we expect it? I said, doc, I'm sorry, but I can't pull out inventions out of a bag. I don't know geometry. I need to study the subject and all that. And that was it. I had no choice. So then, again, when the right kind of people who can unlock that potential, make a request, or in this case, put a little pressure on you, then you can actually produce the goods. Then your mind begins to work. You begin to become a little creative. The pressure actually helps in that creative nudge that you need. And so I made a geometry kit for them. And I sent the geometry kit. And then again, I got this very nice call from Neha. Hi, Paul. How did you do it? I said, sir, yeah, again, I'm not used to this. No, I said, geometry kit. But in the geometry kit, there are two things on the right of the geometry kit. Those two things, T-shaped structures. Those little T-shaped structures don't exist in even geometry for the sighted. If you know how to bisect lines, you remember how to bisect lines? You take a compass and you make two arcs, intersection, point of intersection, join the points of intersection. Now, for someone who's blind, drawing the arcs is bad enough, but then to find the point of intersection of the arcs and then connect them is an absolute nightmare. But those things, I call them the bisectors, the two T-shaped things. I've got them here. Those things actually make bisecting a line even easier for a sighted person. And it's much quicker. You don't even need a compass. So, and you can bisect. And so that's what you're saying. No, how did you think of it? I said, Neha, I had no choice. You didn't give me a choice. So I came up with that. So that is something that is just actually entering the market. And we've produced molds for most of them. The set squares are pending. And so that is a bit of my journey with working with the blind. And this is where my journey of, what should I say, being inspired and being interested in stuff that technical started. There was this guy in second standard Radiant Readers, a guy called John Harrison. There was a story about John Harrison, who was a clockmaker, who made these chronometers that helped solve the problem of longitude. When he made these clocks, they were so fascinating to look at. Beautiful. You can't help but be inspired, both from the artistic point of view and from the functional point of view. What you're looking at is predominantly artistic, both the dial as well as the engraving. The irony is that engraving is not visible. It goes on the inside of the clock. They close the cover and you don't see any of that engraving, but it's so exquisite. Okay, so, and the mechanics and the engineering that went into producing this device is just mind-blowing. It still fascinates me. And so when you see something like that, these things can also unlock creativity. I used to borrow this book from the British. It was in the reference section in the British Council Library. It's called Watchmaking by a person called George Daniels. He restored most of another fellow called Breguet's watches. It was my textbook to learn mechanical engineering. So I'm not a mechanical engineer, but I learned all the techniques of precision engineering here. And the first 5 of my inventions were mechanical horological inventions. Through a set of circumstances, I got to meet the author of the book, Dr. George Daniels. He was known as Britain's living legend, just passed away recently. And when you meet someone like that, again, you're fired up. You're fired up like nobody else can fire you up. You really become creative. You can start thinking like you've never thought before. And you come up with things. So I came up with different things, perpetual calendar, large date mechanisms, and anyway, those are the, but all that was not really, didn't take me anywhere. I mean, I made some money on one of the inventions, but that was just a foundation and what should I say, a preparation for this final phase of my life's journey in the last 12 years. I learned all this because when I started making the devices for the blind, these Braille displays, they require a very high degree of mechanical, what should I say, expertise to make small parts. And everywhere I went, I told you these encouraging people said it can't be done. I did it because I had learned that along the way, these inspiring people, learned from them and realized that I could actually make the parts. So the first Braille display right up in the beginning, I made the parts myself because they told me it couldn't be done. And that is kind of, in a nutshell, my journey. Then there was, again at Braille Without Borders, I met a girl who was one of these grandmasters from one of these European countries, and she wanted to teach chess to the blind, and so I made a chess board, for a tactile chess board, because it's low profile. You can kind of run your fingers without disrupting anything. This would be more of an innovation, not an invention, because you've just adapted. But this is something that, this is my proto, and I gave it to her to evaluate, and she said, this is fantastic, because now I can use it in my school, where the blind would actually find it much easier to play chess. Because, see, they can take in spatial thing by putting their palms on the thing. If they have to use their fingers, then it's difficult to get the orientation properly. So this was chess. So that, in a nutshell, is the life of an inventor, and I hope I've inspired some of you to look for those little keys that will help you unlock creativity. In most cases, it requires, I would say personally, it's people who have touched me and I've been touched by their lives and challenged, like those Neha and Aishwarya and Sabriya and all these people. They are in a league by themselves. And when you meet them, you come away touched. You can come away touched, feel good, and go away, not do anything. But if you come away touched, and you go a little further, and you're inspired to do something, then that little inspiration and the desire to do something is a kind of a slow unlocking of creativity that would otherwise remain dormant. In my case, in meeting inspiring people, reading about inspiring people, is just, that unlocks creativity. When it comes to being creative, this theme of the talk, touch, is the most important thing, but it's not just be touched, you've got to take it to the next level by allowing the inspiration to go hand in hand with being touched. You don't get touched and you just walk away and do nothing. You feel good for the moment and you do nothing, then that's kind of, you let your creativity remain dormant. So you have an opportunity at every stage in life to stoke those little embers of creativity and kind of let them loose. And as you let them loose, the more you let them loose, the more versatile you become in harnessing creativity. It's just been an exciting journey because you don't really need to be an expert when you are creative, because creativity by itself will foster invention or innovation, which will make you adapt to what you don't know. All it takes is a little slight flipping of the mindset and to allow yourself to explore and risk failing. It's not a problem failing, because failing, as Edison said, I just know 1,000 ways how not to do something. He said 1,000 failures before he produced the light bulb. He said, I know 1,000 ways how not to do something. It's not failure. So it's just a matter of perspective. So I'll end with that, and we'll go into questions, I think.